The morning flight from New York to Miami started like any other, mildly chaotic, with passengers jostling through the aisles, dragging oversized carry-ons that clearly weren't going to fit in the overhead bins. The air buzzed with complaints about legroom and announcements barely audible over the din. Flight attendants, armed with their best practice smiles, moved through the cabin, exuding the kind of forced cheerfulness that comes with years of pretending turbulence isn't a big deal. Kelly McFarland was in her element. A veteran flight attendant known for her sharp wit and no-nonsense approach, she believed in maintaining order at all costs. She wasn't here to coddle anyone. She was here to enforce the rules and, if necessary, lay down the law. With her clipboard in hand and her heels clicking on the narrow aisle, Kelly exuded authority. Her stride faltered when she spotted him. Row 12, aisle seat. A man in his mid-40s sat quietly, flipping through a magazine. He looked unremarkable. Polo shirt, khakis, and a neatly trimmed beard. But atop his head sat the pièce de résistance, a bright red MAGA hat. The bold white letters, "Make America Great Again," practically screamed under the fluorescent cabin lights. Kelly's stomach tightened. To her, the hat wasn't just an accessory. It was a symbol of everything divisive and controversial. As she watched him adjust it with a casual indifference, her pulse quickened. Her colleagues passed him without a second glance, but Kelly couldn't ignore it. This was her chance, her moment to stand up for what she believed in. As the flight settled into cruising altitude, Kelly made her move. She approached row 12 with a smile so tight it could have snapped. "Excuse me, sir," she said, loud enough for nearby passengers to pause their conversations. "Your hat is causing discomfort for some passengers. I'm going to have to ask you to remove it." The man glanced up, his expression as calm as a summer lake. "I don't think it's bothering anyone," he replied evenly, before turning a page in his magazine. Kelly's smile faltered. "It's our policy to prevent anything that could be deemed offensive or disruptive," she pressed, her voice gaining an edge. "I'll need you to remove it, or I'll have to escalate this." He sighed, folding his magazine with deliberate calm. "If you feel this strongly," he said, standing and gathering his belongings, "I'll leave." His tone carried no hint of anger, no trace of sarcasm. He simply walked toward the exit, as if heading to a yoga retreat. Passengers stared, wide-eyed, some whispering behind their hands. Kelly stood frozen, expecting murmurs of approval, maybe even applause. Instead, the cabin fell eerily silent. A child in row 9 dropped their juice box with a loud thud, but even that didn't break the spell. Kelly's victory felt hollow, the man's unbothered calm gnawing at her confidence. She returned to her station, head held high, but a nagging feeling told her that the turbulence wasn't over. It was just beginning. By the time the flight landed in Miami, Kelly McFarland had fully restored her confidence. She convinced herself that she had done the right thing. In fact, she almost felt proud as passengers disembarked, imagining the stories they'd tell about her standing up for decency. Her polished smile was firmly back in place as she prepared for the next leg of her shift. But her bubble of self-assurance popped the moment she stepped into the terminal. Waiting just beyond the jet bridge was Mark Donovan, the airline's COO. Tall, sharply dressed in a tailored suit and radiating an aura of authority, Mark wasn't a man who showed up casually. His gaze locked on Kelly, and there was no mistaking the sharp edge in his expression. "Kelly," he said tersely, "follow me." Passengers glanced between them, their curiosity practically buzzing. One whispered, "Ooh, someone's in trouble," as Kelly squared her shoulders, trying to hide the nervous flutter in her chest. The walk to the private office felt like a perp walk. The fluorescent lights of the terminal seemed harsher, and the echo of their footsteps was the only sound. Mark didn't say a word, but his stiff posture screamed disapproval. Inside the sterile, sparsely decorated office, Mark closed the door and gestured for Kelly to sit. She hesitated, feeling the weight of the situation but still clinging to the idea that she had acted righteously. "Do you know who you removed from the flight today?" Mark asked, his voice icy enough to frost the windows. Kelly frowned, her confidence wavering. "A disruptive passenger. He was wearing a hat that—" "Stop!" Mark interrupted, his tone slicing through her excuse like a knife. He dropped a thick file onto the table, the sound making her jump. "That passenger," he said, leaning forward, "was Jacob Randolph. He owns this airline." Kelly's stomach plummeted. She opened her mouth, but all that came out was a weak, he... Mark's piercing gaze didn't waver. "Mr. Randolph has requested to speak with you personally," he said, his tone so final it left no room for argument. For the first time, Kelly felt the full weight of what she had done. The righteous glow she'd carried all day extinguished in an instant, replaced by a sinking dread. "Follow me," Mark said again, standing. Kelly's legs felt like lead as she rose, the reality of the situation pressing down on her with every step. She wasn't walking into a meeting. She was heading straight into turbulence she hadn't seen coming. Kelly's heart pounded as she stepped into the executive suite. The office was pristine and intimidating, with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the Miami skyline. The contrast between the breathtaking view and the oppressive silence inside made her palms sweat. Sitting at a polished mahogany desk was Jacob Randolph. Gone was the casual, unassuming passenger she had kicked off the plane. Now, he was every inch the CEO, exuding authority in a sharp, tailored navy suit. His piercing gaze met hers, making her wish she could evaporate on the spot. "Ms. McFarland," Randolph began, his voice calm but cutting, as he gestured toward the chair opposite him. "Please, sit." Kelly hesitated for a fraction of a second before obeying, feeling like a student summoned to the principal's office. She placed her hands in her lap, doing her best to appear composed, though her racing heart betrayed her. Randolph leaned back in his chair, his tone measured as he spoke. "I wear that hat," he began, "not to make a political statement, but to test my employees. I want to see how they treat every passenger, regardless of appearance, attire, or personal beliefs. Today, Ms. McFarland, I was disappointed." Kelly swallowed hard, her confidence slipping through her fingers like sand. "Sir, I didn't realize..." Randolph raised a hand, cutting her off mid-sentence. "It doesn't matter whether you knew who I was. Your job," he emphasized, his gaze unyielding, "is to treat every passenger with respect. Instead, you allowed your personal bias to dictate your actions." She fidgeted in her seat, her usual sharp wit dulled by the weight of his words. "It won't happen again," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sure it won't," Randolph replied, his tone cool but final. "Here's what's going to happen. You will complete mandatory retraining in professionalism and customer service. If you pass, you'll keep your job. If not, you're out. Understood?" "Yes, sir," Kelly murmured, her face flushed with a mixture of shame and regret. Randolph studied her for a moment, then leaned forward slightly. "One more thing," he said, a trace of sardonic humor in his voice. "The next time you decide to make a stand, make sure you know exactly who you're standing against. Consider this: turbulence, a warning." As Kelly left the office, the door clicking shut behind her, she felt a new weight settle on her shoulders. For the first time in her career, she realized the real turbulence wasn't in the skies, it was in herself. News of the incident spread quickly among airline staff and passengers. Some praised Randolph's calm response, while others criticized Kelly for her lack of professionalism. Online, debates raged over the story, and Kelly found herself the subject of unwelcome attention. Months later, Kelly returned to work, humbled but determined to rebuild her reputation. Meanwhile, Jacob Randolph's quiet insistence on fairness earned him new respect within the industry. The incident became a cautionary tale, reminding everyone in the airline of one critical lesson: treat every passenger with dignity, no matter what they wear.